Okay, so welcome back to the rating system PHP tutorial. We've gone slightly off track with explaining how we retrieve this result set from our database table. However, it all does tie into the overall basics of PHP and how we grab data and manipulate it, etc. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually display this data out in HTML format. So we're going to process it. Pass it, show it to the user in the browser. So let's go ahead and get through this quite quickly. I'm going to do a lot of escaping, or not escaping, but coming out of PHP and back into PHP. This is just my preferred method of doing things instead of echoing everything within a loop. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So the first thing I want to do is I want to check if there are any articles, if they do exist. So I'm going to use count, which counts the elements in an array. And into this I'm going to pass articles, and I'm going to say if count of articles equals 0, then I'm going to break out of here, break back in, and I'm going to say sorry, no articles. And essentially this breaking out just means that we can output in HTML and we don't have to echo anything out. It's just very slightly faster, and if you're doing a lot of this, then it makes it a lot faster to escape and just output anything here. So if, for example, I was to say get articles 0, we get this error message here. If I was to say get articles 1, we're not outputting any articles, but this disappears. So hopefully that makes sense. Now otherwise I want to go ahead and I want to loop through this result set. We're not now looping directly through our database, we're looping through what's been returned by this. So let's change that back to 5. So else, we're going to use a for each loop, or a for each construct, and what this is going to do is this is going to loop through each element of this array, this get articles array, or this get articles function, which has returned an array which is now stored in articles. So we can say for each articles as article, so we're saying for every article call this now article, and we can now do something like echo article title. So remember when we printed the array out earlier, we saw that we saw the data that had been returned. Now we can actually use this to actually display it to the user. So for each articles as article, again I'm going to escape out and I'm going to create a container here, and I'm just going to give this a class of article. We're not actually going to be styling anything here, I'm just keeping it semantically correct. So we've got our div class article. Let's go ahead and output our title. So we're breaking back into PHP, but we're doing this all on one line now. So we're saying echo article title. And then just after this we want some brackets. So remember, not within our PHP tags. We want some brackets and we want to echo out the rating. Okay, so we break back into PHP within our brackets. So it does look confusing, but it's not really that bad. Oops, I've duplicated the line. So echo, and we want to echo the rating. So article rating. Now later on we're going to have some problems with this, and I'll leave it as it is for now, but we're going to need to use the number format function, because actually our calculations are going to return more decimal places than we actually need. So let's go ahead now and create another container within this. So div class equals rate, and remember we're still in HTML now, so we need to break I'm going to say rate, and then I'm going to break into PHP, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to loop through the numbers 1 to 5 and output an anchor tag, or an anchor element, a link essentially. So I'm going to say for, and don't confuse this with for each. Now what I'm doing is a for loop, which you should be familiar with. It's a basic programming concept. So I'm going to say x equals 1 while x is less than or equal to 5, and then I'm going to say x plus plus. So this is our setter, our condition, and our increment or decrement, depending on which way you're going. And what we do now is I'm going to break out of PHP, and then here I'm going to create a link. So if I do like A for now with a space, you'll see that we get this. We've got the title here, and we've got rate A 5 times. So what we can now do is utilize this X value that we've created here, and we can actually apply this into here. So I can break back into PHP and I can say echo X, and what this has done is it will just stick a hash in there for now. It will just echo out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for every article. So it's extremely useful, and it avoids us. It avoids repetition. Essentially, this is why I've chosen to do this. We don't want to type out 5 anchor elements. We can just do it on the fly and do it dynamically. So that's the reason that I've done that, and you can see that the result is here now. Now, what do we want this to link through to? That's the important thing. Well, I'm going to be doing the processing of the rating within this file, because remember, we want to allow this to rate anything. So we want to be able to include the functionality anywhere to be able to rate an article on one page, or a blog post on another page, or a comment on another page. So I'm going to say article.php, and I'm going to pass a get parameter to this this page, and the page that we're currently working on now, and I'm going to say item equals, or I could say rate equals, and then I'm going to echo out the ID of the article. So I'm going to break back into PHP, and I'm going to say echo article and the ID of the article. So let's go ahead and refresh. Nothing's changed obviously, but let's go ahead and inspect these. You can see that we've got rate equals 1. Oh, that's odd. Hold on. Oh yeah, of course, yeah. So for the first article here, which has the ID of 1, we can confirm that here, 1, and this article title. You see we've got article rate equals 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 here. Oh no. Okay, let's do this another way. Let's say item equals 1 and rating equals, and we need a value here, so we can't just put 1 in, we need to follow on from this X count. So let's say echo X. So again, this is great for avoiding repetition. So what we've done now is we've got article.php, we're passing the item that we want to rate, and then we're passing the rating through here as well. Remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because this is part of our X counter. So you can see now for article 1 we've got our possible choices. Let's go ahead and get rid of this, and get rid of this, and let's open up the second one, and here. So item now equals 2, and we've got ratings from 1 to 5. So we've avoided repetition here. We've outputted everything correctly, and now we need to go ahead and actually process our rating. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to do this right up here, so away from any of our output, and we essentially need to check that these 2 variables have been set. So at the moment, this is what's going to happen. When I click on this first article and I want to rate it a 5, you see that we go through to article.php. Oh, it's articles.php. Let's go and change that. There we go. So articles.php, and it says item equals 1 and rating equals 5. Now we've got all the data that we need within this URL, or this string, to be able to choose the item that we want to rate and the rating that we want to give it. Now we also need to take security into consideration, because anyone that can view a source of a web page or can inspect these can essentially see how we're doing this, and we're passing the item value, or the item here, and the rating. So we need to be able to determine first of all whether this item exists. We don't need to do this, but we're going to create a function which returns whether this item exists. For example, a user could come in here and do billions of figures, and then they could change the rating to 10, for example. What we want to do is we want to first of all check whether this item exists. If it doesn't, we don't process the rating, and we also want to check that the rating is between 1 and 5, our specified values. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of this, and let's go ahead and create this functionality. So here we want to first of all check if these variables have been set, these get variables have been set. So I'm going to use isSet, and I'm going to say $_get, and remember the first one was called item, and then we can comma separate this, so the isSet constructor, language construct, sorry, will allow multiple values to be passed. So we want to check rating as well. So I'm going to just echo out for now, OK. So let's go ahead and refresh. We don't see any output, that's fair enough. When I click on here, you see we get this OK. That's because this and this are set, so we've done that. We've avoided any undefined index errors or anything like that. Let's go ahead and put these into variables of their own, just so we can easily use them. So I'm going to say item equals get item, relatively straightforward. And I'm going to say rating equals $_get rating. Okay, so we're going to be a bit inefficient here. Now we've determined that we wanted our maximum to be 5. We could in fact create a variable up here which defined our maximum value, for example. So we could say maximum vote, maximum rating equals 5, and then we could here we're going to basically do a check that says is it between 1 and 5. So we could say is it between 1 and maximum rating, and we could also use maximum rating just here, blah blah blah. I'm not going to do that for now. In fact, I might as well. Maximum rating. So as long as that makes sense, then we'll go ahead and do that. So maximum rating equals 5. This could be defined anywhere. It could be defined in a global file somewhere. For now I'm being a bit inefficient, as I said, and I'm just, you know, popping it in there. Okay, let's go ahead and get our other checks out of the way, and then we'll go on to the next part of the video, and we'll look at actually getting some functionality into this. So the checks we need to do, and this is going to be quite a big condition. We want to say if not empty item, this here, and not empty rating. Now bear in mind, empty, if something's 0, will still return true. So if for example the user had put 0 for the item and 0 for the rating, they've modified the URL somehow, these will both return true. So you know, that's worrying, but we also are going to include some other checks as well, which really, you know, mean that it's doesn't really matter, essentially. So we could be a bit more efficient there, but we're not going to worry because we've got other checks that we're going to put in place to combat these if not. So I'm going to say item exists. Now this is a function that we're going to create a bit later. I am going to explain it quickly now and what we pass through to it, but we're not actually going to define the function or create any of the functionality within it just yet. What we're going to do is we're going to pass through a table name, and then we're going to also pass the item. Now the reason that we're doing it this way is because, remember I said we want to include as much widespread flexibility as possible. So if for example you were doing this on a blog page, you may have item exists, item within a blog table. Okay, so you might want to you might have to reuse this item exists function. For now, we're just saying articles because our table in our database is called articles. So essentially what it's doing is it's looking inside this articles and saying, does this ID exist within here? That's essentially all this function is going to do. We haven't, you know, created it yet, so it's not going to work. It will return an error. And we want to make sure, by the way, that's equal to true. We don't have to include that, but it's always good to pop something in there like that, just for clarity. Okay, so now we want to do the check. Now you've noticed I've created 2 parentheses. This check is going to be that the value is between 1 and 5, or the value is between 1 and maximum rating. So I am going to say if the rating is greater than or equal to 1, okay, which is, you know, fine, and the rating is less than or equal to maximum rating. Now, bear in mind that if you change this maximum rating after you've had a few votes, you're going to get inconsistent results. That's just you know, to warn you. I've just done this because, you know, someone will pick up on the fact that I could have defined this elsewhere. But anyway, these checks now combined will, you know, are enough to say if it's not empty. So if it's an empty string, we're checking the item exists. We haven't created this functionality yet. And then we're checking that it's between the boundaries that we expect it. Now if it is all of these and this does return true, then we can go ahead and we can rate, which again is a function that we haven't created yet, and we'll be doing that inside the rating.php file. We want to rate articles, so again we're including the flexibility to choose which table we want to place this rating into, and we want to pass which item, which is going to be the ID of that in that table, and then we want to pass the rating. Okay, so and after that we want to go ahead and we want to relocate the user, so header location articles.php back to this page. Okay, so that's why when I showed you in the first part of the tutorial, when we were clicking on it, it was flicking to this back to this page, or flicking to the same page, processing everything, then it was coming back and redirecting us and showing us the new rating. Okay, so a quick recap before we end this video and go on to the next part. There's a lot here to take in, especially if you're new to PHP or really to programming in general. We are checking whether this get variable set, remember we've passed it through here, we've included this loop as well. We're redefining our variables, or placing the get variables within variables here, so we can check them in here and it's a lot easier. We're checking whether the item that's been passed through the URL is empty. We're checking the rating if that's empty. We're checking if the item exists, so whether this function returns true. We haven't created this function yet, remember. And then we're checking if the rating is within the boundaries that we expect, so if it's greater than or equal to 1, and the rating's less than or equal to the maximum rating. Okay, so that's going to provide all the necessary checks, and when this entire condition has returned true, we are going to use the rate function to rate a record within the article table, or the articles table. And we are rating item, which corresponds to the item's ID, and then we are applying the rating to this record, to this unique row, and then we can update rating total and rating count. And as I said, the reason that we're able to pass this table name is to keep flexibility. So we could have another table called blogs with the same thing, the same ID, rating total, rating count, and we could just as easily go ahead and rate blogs as well in whatever fashion we wanted. I know we've created all this code in here, but you know, we could do it however we wanted. That might vary across your website, which is why we've created a function that allows us to do so. And then it redirects back to this page. So that was a long, piece of, not really a long piece of code, but a lot of explanation for these concepts, particularly if you're new. But let's head over to the next part of the tutorial to create the item exists and the rate functions.